this administration took a much different stance than the Biden administration, in particular its efforts to end the war. And so the Trump administration's first and foremost priority was ending the war diplomatically, and that meant speaking to both the Ukrainians and the Russians. So they restarted diplomatic overtures towards the Russians that had largely gone cold under the Biden administration.
Welcome to Reporter's Notebook, where we talk to the Washington Examiner's top journalists about the stories breaking on their beats. I'm Jim Antle, and I'm joined today by defense reporter Mike Brest. And Mike, there's been a sort of back and forth, a little bit of controversy over a temporary pause in some munitions that were being sent to Ukraine on the grounds that American stockpiles are depleted. There's some dispute as to whether they really were that depleted. What's sort of the current state of play there?
So what happened was last week, the Pentagon paused some of its aid shipments, specifically defensive weapons, to Ukraine. And so the department said this was a part of a broader review of where U.S. stockpiles of key munitions are at. And so the White House initially said that this was done following the review, and it was done in alignment with the president's America First agenda. And then we started hearing more and more, and a couple of days passed. The president spoke with both Ukrainian President Zelensky as well as Vladimir Putin, and he was, by all accounts, including his own admissions, very frustrated with Vladimir Putin, and felt like the conversations that he was having with Putin were going nowhere. Mm-hmm. And so in the aftermath of those conversations, the president announced he would restart that paused Ukrainian aid. And so the aid is a big deal because it's largely air defense. And so air defense has been key for Ukraine because Russia has fired, at this point, countless numbers of ballistic missiles and cruise missiles at Ukrainian targets, oftentimes in densely populated cities. And so Ukraine, from their perspective, can't have enough of these air defenses because they're being attacked on a daily basis, almost a nightly basis at this point, especially over the last couple of weeks. And so had the pause in this aid gone on much longer, we would have started to see the realities play out on the battlefield when Ukraine runs out of the stockpiles that it had. Now, the president has said he is restarting a lot of this aid, and so from public reporting, it seems like a lot of the aid that had been paused was already in Poland or in other places in Europe. So getting it to the Ukrainians, in theory and in practice, doesn't take that long from where it already was. Right. And so this is aid that had already been approved by Congress under the Biden administration. Mm-hmm. And so it's unclear now if there will be additional aid pursued by Congress and authorized by the Trump administration, but at least at this point, the aid that has already been approved is on its way to the Ukrainians.
Well, it does sound like the Trump administration is considering aid of its own separate to what had been authorized under Biden. But in any event, it's clear that things have sort of shifted in that, Trump originally was pressuring Zelensky and seemed to view him as the primary obstacle to a peace deal. And now he is much more focused on Putin.
That's exactly right. This administration took a much different stance than the Biden administration, in particular its efforts to end the war. And so the Trump administration's first and foremost priority was ending the war diplomatically, and that meant speaking to both the Ukrainians and the Russians. So they restarted diplomatic overtures towards the Russians that had largely gone cold under the Biden administration, which viewed its priority and the United States' priority to be to aid Ukraine and trying to defend their territory. And so the shift in priorities from the United States manifestly changed the dynamics on the battlefield because the U.S. was no longer in complete alignment with its European allies or with Ukrainians. And so over the last 6 months of the Trump administration, the president has really found a limit to his personal abilities to make the deals that he's looking for. The Russians continue to maintain positions that they aren't able to achieve on the battlefield. They maintain positions that both the Ukrainians and even the Trump administration have said are unacceptable. And so we're talking about things like the Ukrainians with, essentially neutering its military.
Right, demilitarizing.
Giving up the Russian occupied territory, both that it currently possesses, but also areas that it is trying to gain hold of. And so with the Russians continuing to pursue such maximalist goals militarily and diplomatically, the United States and President Trump is recalculating and recalibrating how he's approaching both President Zelensky and President Putin.
So on another front where the Trump administration has been negotiating, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is in town this week. Netanyahu was proposing that maybe President Trump should get the Nobel Peace Prize. What's the status of some of those talks in terms of Israel and Iran, where there's been the ceasefire, but also the efforts to sort of wind things down in Gaza?
So that's exactly right. There are two, I would say, parallel deals that the president and Prime Minister Netanyahu are pursuing. And so the first deal is a deal to secure the release of the roughly 50 hostages that Hamas still holds, and to create some sort of a post-war day after reconstruction plan for Gaza, and simultaneously an Israel-Iran deal that ends there, even though the war has ended and the two sides agreed to a ceasefire, some sort of long-term détente or some sort of path to peace moving forward. And so in that broader U.S.-Iran deal, in the past, the framework of that deal has often reflected Israeli-Saudi normalization and the building out of the Abraham Accords from President Trump's first term.
Thank you, Mike. You can read Mike and the rest of our national security team's coverage at washingtonexaminer.com.